Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar titled Forget 0 Day, Hello 0 Second. I'm Allison Grady and will be the host for today's event. With me today is Marie Hattar, who is our Chief Marketing Officer at Check Point. You can ask questions at any time during the event. You'll find a chat Q&A window on the right-hand side of your screen, but Marie will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. But feel free to chat in any comments, questions, or if you need technical assistance, we have a team on standby who can help you with any issues that come up. With that, we're ready to get started. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Marie Hattar.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everyone. I'm Marie Hattar, CMO of Check Point Software Technologies. I'm here today to take you through a side-by-side analysis that we recently conducted called 0 Second. We were curious. We knew our threat prevention products were very fast, but we really wanted to find out how fast. So we devised a test scenario to see how long it would take several vendors who also claimed to be fast to detect, isolate, and block unknown malware threats. 0-day malware. That got us to thinking. A day sounded like eternity when it comes to malware sitting on a network. We even thought a second was too long, so we named the test 0 Second. I'm going to walk you through what we found out in our investigation. Networks need protection against all of these growing threats. They need to stop malware before it enters your network, so it doesn't even get the opportunity to start spreading. And they need to do it quickly. Now, a lot can happen in an hour, a minute, and even a second. We know because we looked it up. I thought it would be fun to share. Every minute that goes by, our hearts beat about 60 times. About 210 people die from stress, and about 440 people have their identity stolen. In that same minute, hackers will have stolen another $846,000. Every minute. What is shocking is actually what happens in 1 second. In 1 second, 2.1 million emails are sent and received, several of them probably announcing the 4 new babies that were born. But there will also be 18 new malware infections and 11 megabytes of data stolen during that time as well. Every second of every minute of every day. The latest studies from Panda Security showed that 20% of all of the malware that's ever existed was created in 2013. That equates to 30 million pieces of new malware generated in 1 year, or 83,000 new pieces per day. Now, if we look at the figures from the first quarter of 2014, that number nearly doubles. Catch rate is all about measuring the effectiveness of sandbox systems to accurately identify and block unknown malware. It's a very important and significant metric for security solutions. And for those of you that attended our Unknown 300 test, you saw the analysis in the test that we did then to understand what is the catch rate of different systems. What we're doing here is looking at catch speed. And catch speed is the rate at which these unknown malware threats are detected, identified, blocked. So the 0 Second test is all about catch speed and testing what this metric is. Fundamentally, though, if we step back and look at all of this, networks need protection against all these growing threats. They need to stop malware before it enters your network so it doesn't even get the opportunity to start spreading. And they also need to do it quickly. So when it comes to malware, every second counts. If you had a choice, would you let malware onto your network for even 1 second? You probably wouldn't. And it turns out you do have that choice. So with that, we're introducing the 0 Second test. We set up a test bench and created a scenario specifically to measure how long it takes vendors to detect, identify, and block new unknown threats. Now here's a typical scenario that can happen. Imagine your human resources or HR recruiter receiving an email from a candidate. This candidate has great credentials and they've attached a resume. The recruiter doesn't know this, but the resume document is actually infected. The HR recruiter opens the attachment. It infects their computer immediately. This makes their machine what we commonly refer to in the industry as patient zero, or the first infected machine in a malware attack. From there, the malware can propagate laterally in the network, infecting additional computers, servers, storage, and any other connected devices. The 0-second test bench looked like this. We simulated an attacker PC and placed a victim employee workstation behind each of the different vendors' firewall solutions. You can see that we also had an MTA in some scenarios, which I'll get to in the next slide. But essentially, an MTA, it stands for a mail transfer agent, and it's an option that's available on some of the security systems. And what it does is it holds mail or email off the network during sandboxing to ensure your network is protected. Now, if a vendor supports that function, we included it. So in this first test, both Palo Alto and Fortinet do not have or do not support MTA, so you don't see it in this diagram. With the test bench in place, our analysts selected several unknown malware file types. One of the things we did is we made sure that all of the vendors in this sandbox test could detect these unknown malware. And this unknown malware was attached to emails and sent to the victim employee workstation inside the network. As each vendor conducted their threat emulation, that same malware was sent again and again every 60 seconds to the same mailbox. The sandbox process detects and identifies the malware, but to block that same malware in the future, they actually need to update their gateway. Until they do, the same malware would be allowed to get into the network. And so with this sort of test and this repeated transmission, it would reveal how long it takes before the same infected malware is blocked. Now in this case, for both Palo Alto and for Fortinet, they immediately sent the email when they got it to the sandbox, but then they also let it through to the mail server so that that email was delivered to that employee workstation at the same time that it was being tested in the sandbox. So the malware entered the network during the test. And that's the key consideration to look at as you look at security solutions. So the email got distributed, and in the meantime, the sandbox tested. And at some point, it decided whether it was a clear file or it could be a corrupt file, and then would update the gateway. Now contrast this with FireEye and with Check Point. In this scenario, the same thing happened, but what you see here is we actually show the MTA that's sitting right by the firewall, which would hold the email while the test is being sent to the gateway, to the cloud to be tested. Once the cloud or the sandbox clears the file, that's when the MTA would actually release the email to the mail server, and at that point, the mail server would deliver it to the employee. So very much a distinction between those vendors. One holds on to the file so they know it's safe, and the other one lets it through, and then we'll start protecting against it sometime later. To give you a little more detail about the participants, 4 vendor products were tested in our comparison. We looked at the Check Point with Threat Cloud on the 13500 gateway. We also used software version R77.20. For FireEye, we used their email threat prevention cloud. For Palo Alto, we used the Wildfire Cloud on the PA 5020 gateway, and then we also used PAN-OS 6.0.5. For Fortinet, we used the FortiSandbox Cloud on the FortiGate 1500D gateway, and the OS we used was FortiOS 5.2.1. Now, to ensure the test validity, all of these tested platforms were updated and patched with the latest firmware and updates that were available from each vendor as of October 2014. The test configuration also matched the vendor's test practices. Our only objective from this test was to evaluate the detection and prevention time for malicious files. As you'll see in the next slide, actually in the next two slides, we eliminated the catch rate performance to ensure that this did not influence these tests in any way. All I can say is the results were startling. Check Point had the fastest threat emulation. Malware spent 0 seconds on the network and was emulated in a record 4 minutes. FireEye spent twice as long, taking 8 minutes. Palo Alto Networks took 68 minutes and let the malware enter the network during that time. And Fortinet also let the malware through and took 79 minutes. Now, there are several features that every threat prevention solution should include. The first is that solutions should provide multiple layers of protection, including protection for both known and unknown malware. 2, they should deploy a mail transfer agent to ensure that mail gets distributed only when it is found to be safe. 3, they should prevent files from entering your network, not only detect the malware. And 4, they should inspect all archive files, including zip and RAR files. Some of the vendors that we tested were missing one of these features, while others were missing several of them. Again, all of those are very critical in safeguarding your network. Here are some of the interesting other findings we observed during the testing. Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet allowed potentially infected emails to enter the network while they were being scanned. Now, if you think about it, with an average 9% of employees prone to click on an email even if they didn't know the sender, that's a big risk. Both Check Point and FireEye protect the network during the scanning process, although FireEye took twice as long to sandbox the infected file. With the speed of business today, can you really afford to wait twice as long? It would be like purposefully picking the longer line at the grocery store. Now, who does that? Palo Alto Networks also could not emulate any archive file types other than zip. What you see here are the results of the 0-second test next to the results from the unknown 300 test. Remember, 0-second tested emulation and protection speed only. We used an unknown malware that we confirmed everyone would catch. The unknown 300 test evaluated the catch rate. The 0-second test looked at how much unknown malware each vendor would detect and how much they would let slip through. Everyone wants fast results, but they also want good results. With Check Point, you get both. With the others, you're making security compromises, and that translates into dollars spent on cleaning up preventable infections after they've occurred. In summary, we know malware is growing in scope and depth in both known and unknown malware. We all want fast and accurate solutions, and that's what we should be demanding. As you evaluate different threat prevention solutions, it makes sense you would select the one with the fastest emulation and best catch rate. We encourage you to try threat emulation for your network and to protect yourself against unknown malware. And again, don't take our word for it. You can easily try this test out for yourself. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening and would like to open up the floor for any questions you may have. Okay, I have a question in here. If an emulation takes on average 4 minutes, how does that impact the delivery of the file? So in Check Point's case, emulation takes 4 minutes, and during that time, the file is held in the MTA. Only when it's cleared does it get delivered. Another question, I missed it. What is an MTA? What role does it perform in this test? So an MTA is a mail transport agent, and it's the name of an application that receives incoming email both from local users that are people within the same email domain, for example, and also from remote senders. And it then forwards the outgoing email for delivery to the final destination. MTAs are an important security feature because it separates the direct connection to the organization internal mail server. And it also offers a location that holds emails, including those with suspected attachments, until they're scanned thoroughly. As I mentioned in the webcast, both Check Point and FireEye hold the email while the file is being emulated. Palo Alto Networks Wildfire and Fortinet's FortiGuard solutions let the files enter the organization's network during the emulation and signature updating process, so potentially exposing those networks to further damage if the virus is inadvertently launched during that time. Question, will you be emailing a copy of this deck? Absolutely. Post this webcast. We will be sending out an email with the links to be able to download this. All right, another question. What other security technologies besides threat emulation, were other security technologies besides threat emulation used to detect the threats? So since all the threats were made unknown, other security technologies such as antivirus wouldn't have been effective until the emulation process had determined whether the file was malicious. The purpose of this test was to test how long it took for emulation to take place and then how long for the signature creation to be done and actually propagated to a gateway so that it would prevent future attacks. For both Palo Alto Networks and Fortinet, it took on average 60 minutes to prevent the now known malware. And Check Point and FireEye prevented the malware in 0 seconds. What is Check Point's answer to malware that specifically evades sandboxing technologies? For example, sleep timer malware, etc. So when a malware within a document uses a time delay and/or waits for user activity, it actually has to launch a process in order to count the time or watch for user activity. And the Threat Cloud Emulation Service will actually detect this process and therefore will be able to determine that the file has malicious content. All right, another question. How much does the Check Point Threat Cloud Emulation Service or private cloud emulation appliance cost? In general, For pricing of any of the Check Point portfolio or both of those options, please see the product catalog on www.checkpoint.com. Does the emulation impact the performance of my gateway? Because we do the emulation either in the cloud or locally on a dedicated threat emulation appliance, there is no additional performance hit other than that incurred for doing the antivirus inspection. Okay, what information is provided back to me after emulating a file? A detailed report is returned to you that includes the file details, any abnormal activity details, the actual runtime screenshots of the sandbox environment. Did all of the vendors detect the file sent as malware? Yes, actually this was really important and vital for this test because we weren't looking to see what the catch rate was, we really were looking at the catch speed. So we just wanted to know how long it would take to prevent the malware. Of course, catch rate is very important. So I would recommend you look at the unknown 300 test to look at catch rate and look at the 0-second test for catch speed. In what environments are these files tested? In this case, the test file was a PDF that exploited an Adobe Reader vulnerability. Threat emulation emulates the Windows operating system, both XP and 7, Microsoft Office 2003 and 2007, as well as Adobe Reader. Microsoft Windows 8 and Office 2010 will be supported in the future. Okay, what platforms are required for the test? To start working with Threat Cloud Emulation Service, you need to first identify files that have possible malicious content, and then send them to the Threat Cloud Emulation Service for analysis. The service works with your existing infrastructure. There is no need to install new equipment. So any existing Check Point security gateway running R77 can inspect files and send them to the Threat Cloud Emulation Service. You can also do this on a private cloud emulation appliance such as the TE250, 1000, or 2000. What protocols can I inspect to detect files? There's web, both HTTP and HTTPS, email, SMTP, and TLS. Now, TLS is supporting using the message transport agent, or MTA topology of the security gateway, or using the agent for the Exchange server. Does this require a new appliance? Can I use my existing firewall, for example, the 12,000 series, to do this? So a new appliance is not needed. Appliances that are running the R77 software can send files to the Threat Cloud Emulation Service. All right, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. For your reference, this webinar has been recorded and will be available for on-demand viewing on the Check Point website. You'll receive an email in the next few days with a link to the recorded presentation. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar, and have a great day.